thank you so much for being here. It's a little past 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. I didn't expect such a big turnout, but I'm so happy to be here. We will be talking about the impact that AI has in healthcare. And I think in the past weeks, we've all been very attentive to how much impact that can actually make. Of course, I'm speaking of the Nobel Prizes. That was the Oscars for us. So let's get started. Now, these are some of the things that people are talking about. So now we're seeing people questioning, why are we using AI? This is from social media, from X or Twitter, and Instagram also. So some are questioning, artificial intelligence detects breast cancer 5 years before it develops. This is what we want to see AI being used for, not to create another social media auto-replier for marketing. No-brainer. And then somebody goes to say, you know what the biggest problem with pushing all things AI is? Wrong direction. I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do art and writing, not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and dishes. So alignment, people, that's really important. Now, these were the big winners of this year's Nobel Prize. You could almost call it a competition. This is what every scientific researcher is dreaming about. Don't be fooled. They will not admit it, but this is the thing. Now, Hopfield and Hinton, they have built a line of research that really has put the groundwork for neural networks that we are seeing the fruits of today. And I really cannot put it into more emphasis that this is long time coming. So you can also say that this is the golden age of AI because you're now getting the recognition that it deserves. Now, there are others who also need to be recognized. Some AI researchers are actually being recognized now for their contributions to healthcare. This is Professor Suchi Saria, who now in 2024 have been named WebMD Health Hero. Now, what she did is she has built this machine learning tool to actually be able to detect sepsis, which is almost like blood poisoning. Now, every hour you don't detect sepsis, the mortality rate goes up 8%. It's almost like an easy solution to that. You get IV fluids in, that's one, but the most important thing is to start antibiotics on a drip. And still, we don't hand out antibiotics like it's candy, because we have to be able to think about the resistance. So if you use it too much, the antibiotic resistance will increase, and that's already a problem. So how do we use this in a careful way, but without risking people's lives or people dying? Now, this is really important because actually sepsis is taking more lives than cancer worldwide. That's something that nobody talks about. So this is really important. Having tools to detect sepsis right from the get-go. If you're coming in with a fever, it's really hard. It could be millions of things. Knowing exactly which patients to focus on, even though they have very diffuse symptoms, is really important. This is what AI in healthcare can really help us with. So now the mortality rate has gone down with 20%. That's a huge number from the trials that she led. Now I want to make another statement. In prehistoric times, we used tools tailored to the goal and task. If you were going on a hunting spree, you were going to make your tools look and be the best for that specific purpose. Now today with AI, it's a bit different. It's actually a paradigm shift. What we're seeing in today's AI tools, they're ready for use before all applications have been mapped out. It's like going on a discovery hunt. What can we use this for? So you're having the models, the brilliant models, the algorithms, and you don't know which specific application you're going to use it for. It might sound strange, but I will come back to this. But just remember this, it's a paradigm shift. We don't always know all the applications that we are going to use it for. Now, I have divided my keynote into 3 bits. So it will be about hope, it will be about hype, and it will of course be about all the things that are playing out as hurdles. Why aren't we seeing more implementation of AI in healthcare? We will go through that. We can start by talking about the hope. A lot of the hope is put into, for instance, the way that the Nobel Committee puts it, the huge potential. So none of the prize winners actually got it for lives saved. They're receiving it because of the potential, the huge potential, because we all know there are going to be lives saved. Now, in order to do that, let's talk about data. This was an iconic front page on The Economist back in 2017. Now, this front page was actually, at that time, it was actually maybe even a little bit, what can I say, like it was controversial. Claiming that data was more important than oil back in 2017 was actually controversial. But the world's most valuable resource is no longer oil, but data. I think we can actually go a couple of steps further. I think the world's most valuable data is no longer social media data, but specifically healthcare data. So nowadays, these technology companies are extracting data from our wearables, from our phones. They can actually know when the next heart attack will come. They can also know if you're pre-diabetic. They know a lot of things. Not necessarily things that they will tell you, these technology companies. They use it, they exploit this data to build better models. We just want the insight, not necessarily when we will have the next attack, but still. Hypothetically, we can extract more data from the same amount and the same formats that we have been using before. Less is more. Now, in the old days, actually, in the old days I mean like 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So what we can say is that from X-rays, we could extract only a couple of key information. So let's say we could say whether you had something foreign in your body, in your lungs. We could say something about if you had a pneumonia, those kind of things. So very few things we were able to tell from that picture. Nowadays, we can tell so much more. With the AI models, we can actually extract all this information. So we actually know if you are on your way to having diabetes type 2, coronary calcium score, cardiovascular disease risk, many, many more things. The question is, do you want to know all these things? Do you want to go in for an X-ray and have all this data taken out? Are you prepared for that? I certainly am not. I would have to say, oh, can you just please tell me about this and this? Maybe later. And this is common. We'll get back to this. I talked about applications in AI. Now, these are some of the key applications in AI. So you have it for clinical decision support, virtual health assistance, personalized health apps, drug development, monitoring, robotics. And through this course of, you could say, a lifespan, you can see everything that you're using AI for from the time you're born, actually before you're born. IVF starts before life itself. You're using AI to correctly identify which embryos are the best, has the highest potential of becoming a human being. So you use it from that point, before life itself starts, and until you die, to calculate the risk of dying, and everything in between. Now, the category that probably has the most commercial attention, that will be in radiology and image recognition, naturally because you need a lot of images, which we have in healthcare. We don't have the confidence in healthcare to say that we're actually a big data generator, but we are. We have a lot of data, we just don't know how to use it all the time. One of the other key things that I will delve into now is drug development. This is really important, how we use AI to further our drug discovery. Now look at this. We discovered penicillin, which is the first antibiotic that we discovered, back in 1928. That was almost, or actually completely by dumb luck. The thing is, we didn't go search for it. So Dr. Alexander Fleming was this brilliant doctor with a specialty in bacteriology who actually were able to discover this. The way he did it, extraordinary. So he went on a trip for a couple of weeks. He took a vacation. He put his petri dishes by the window. The window was open. He had already put his bacteria in the petri dishes. Now he went away, came back, saw that there was no growth. Now any other person would just think, oh, I don't know what happened, it's a failed trial, okay, let's move on. He understood that something had happened there. Some antibiotic method had happened there. So he went to find out what exactly had happened. And what he discovered was that fungus from the neighboring building had flown with the wind and landed in his petri dishes. So you see, you had to have a lot of dumb luck, but also talent. It couldn't just be anyone who saw that and understood that, oh, this is actually antimicrobial effect. And then, since 1928, we have discovered all sorts of antibiotics, but we have also used them up, sort of. We're developing all this resistance because we're using them too frequently, so the bacteria get accustomed to them. Now, back in 2019, a team of researchers at MIT, they used machine learning to discover a new type of antibiotic. That was halicin. The thing is, halicin is actually not, or first and foremost, not an antibiotic. It's actually a failed diabetic drug. We just didn't know that it also had characteristics that could be used as an antibiotic. How would we know that? You would need a lot of dumb luck to discover that. Why would you go looking for antibiotics in between all the diabetic drugs? No reason. So the machine learning tool was able to help us with that. And it did the same thing in 2023, last year, when you found Avicin. Now, when was the last time we found antibiotics with the traditional methods? 35 years ago. So when we use our traditional methods, it takes a lot of time. We don't have that time or luxury. We need them now. So this is my point. You actually need AI to eradicate the need for dumb luck, but also talent. You can systematically look for the antibiotics that you actually need for the future. Now, this slide, you can see the picture of two Nobel Peace Prize winners. They don't need further introduction. In the public, when you ask people about which AI tool they know about, if they can name some, they will, 99% of the time, they will mention ChatGPT. They should be mentioning AlphaFold. And I'm not paid by Google to say this. This is just an example. But Google and DeepMind were able to develop this tool that can predict the 3D structure of proteins, of more than 200 million proteins with a high accuracy. Now, this is called the holy grail of biology. There's a very good reason for that. If you don't know how these proteins look, you won't be able to actually develop good drugs, cancer drugs, vaccines. You need to know how they look in a three-dimensional world. And we have been struggling with this for 50 years. We thought 50 years back that this would take 150 years. That was our estimation. We used half that time. Now, what it does is more important than maybe understanding what it actually does, the algorithm. So it leads to faster and cheaper drug developments for the future. And back in May, AlphaFold 2 got an upgrade to AlphaFold 3. Not many people were aware of that. It wasn't even covered in the media. No media coverage almost. And the groundbreaking upgrade was that from AlphaFold 2 to 3, you could actually now predict the structure of not just individual proteins, but also chains of proteins, so DNA, RNA. This will be one of the most important discoveries looking back. And it has already been acknowledged as so due to the fact that the Nobel Prize was given to this in chemistry. Now, what exactly has it done already? You could say that researchers used AlphaFold to design a new cancer drug candidate in just 30 days. This took years and years. Now, I'm being very specific about calling this candidate because, of course, you can design things, you can have a hypothesis, and then you need to try it in a clinical trial. That shit, it still takes time. Everything involving humans, it still takes time. But we have shortened the time it takes to really design the drug and to test it. So before, what could take us 3 years, even 30 years, is now taking us only 30 days. So we're using AI for all these phases. So PandaOmics is also an AI program. You use it to identify the weakest point in a cancer cell. What is the most specific point where you can actually make the cell burst or go into apoptosis, as it's called, cell death. So you need to identify that target, the weakest point. Then you use AlphaFold to be able to really visualize how it looks in a 3D world. And then you use chemistry fortitude to generate the model, generate the protein. And all of this has done so that we can take it down to 30 days. In the case of HCC cells, so for liver cancer, that is. But this is not just specific for liver cancer, it actually is a good story for all cancer drugs. How we're going to use AlphaFold to design new cancer drugs, candidates as so, in less than a month. Now, there are other things that we need to address when it comes to cancer. So this is another tool that I would like you to all remember, and that's alpha-missense. Now, alpha-missense is a machine learning model that can analyze so-called point mutations, missense mutations. And this tool can actually predict the likelihood of these mutations causing actual problems. So one of the biggest problems with doing this genome predicting is you don't really know which mutations will lead to what cancer or other diseases. So you need to have a good understanding of what millions of mutations can actually lead to actual diseases. And before, when we did human annotations, this was a very hard job to do. So only less than 1%, 0.1%, was confirmed by human experts. Now that number is much higher. There are 71 million possible missense variants in the human genome, and the average person has 9,000 of them. So most are harmless, but some have been linked to cancer, genetic disorders like sickle anemia, and cystic fibrosis. So this is something that we now get more help with. And this is also the way to do precision medicine, how to tailor treatment to your specific genetics. We need the help we can get. So the way alpha-missense works is just like the words in a sentence. So if you switch out some of the words in a sentence, the whole sentence will have a new meaning. It's the same with missense mutations. If you chip out one or the other nucleotides, it will give you a new mutation. Now, we're talking about the frontiers of medicine. This is another thing, AI for brain-computer interface. Now, BCIs, they have been around for several decades already, but it really accelerated development when AI came into the picture. So now you're having implants. They're being operated into the brains, and now you can actually have very good communication between the human brain and a computer. In the example on your left, you see a patient that had been in wheelchair for 12 years. This was a publication that came out last year in 2023. So this patient had been paralyzed from his hips and down, so he couldn't walk. But when we used these cortical implants, he was now able to take his first steps. So the contribution from AI is making sure that the signals are stronger and to make sure that you're actually reading the brain signals correctly. So in real time, it's getting better. So this technology, again, it has been around, it just got a lot better with AI. And then it's the case with Nolan Arboe on your right. So in January, he got his procedure done, surgical procedure. It was robotics that actually was no human involved, because these are so fine threads that you actually need robots to do these procedures. So they implanted him with chips. And of course, it's Elon Musk who is behind this company, Neuralink. And in January, he got this, and then he went on to, on live television, demonstrate how he could play chess with just his mind. So this is a paraplegic patient. He doesn't have any sensory ability or motoric ability from his neck and down. So he was even worse off than the previous patient. Now, he was now able to play music on Spotify and also play chess without moving anything, only with his thoughts. Isn't that amazing? So now this is not getting enough media coverage. Maybe it's too difficult to explain, but I am sure that people would like to hear about this. Now, last month, they actually got an expedited approval from FDA, US Foods and Drug Administration, to go and do clinical trials on something called blind sight. This is how you use AI and this BCI technology to make people who are not able to see, who have lost their sight, now able to see. So if you have the visual cortex in the brain, if that is okay, then you're fine. So without any eyes, let's say you've had some disease or an accident, you will now be able to, through Neuralink, Elon Musk's company, when it becomes commercially available to all, you will be able to regain your eyesight. So they just received the green light to do clinical trials, or actually expedited last month. So things are happening at a rapid pace. Now, I want to show you another research study. So here is a study where they compared GPT, ChatGPT, versus resident physicians. Different so. So they were comparing different specialties to ChatGPT 3.5 and 4.0. Now, if you look at the image, you will be able to see that in most cases, they were almost as good. So not a significant difference there. However, one specialty really had a difference, a significant one. Maybe not so in the picture, but you will be able to see it. It was psychiatry, meaning that psychiatrists, they actually scored less than GPT, 4.0. Yes, I'm hearing some laughter. That's correct, because prior to doing this study, we took it for granted that psychiatry would impossibly be the one that was going to get beaten by this. What about empathy? What about understanding, the human connection? All goes out the window. So we have seen in previous studies that empathy is actually also something that ChatGPT can at least simulate. So from previous studies, you know that it's possible to generate creativity or actually allude to it, but also empathy. And in this case, the human connection is also something you can emulate with ChatGPT. And it depends on the model, but still. So for all the other specialties, they can keep their jobs. Psychiatry, they might need some retraining or some supplements. I'm just joking. It's just one study, but still. Now, what is the goal of using AI? And I'm going back to a Norwegian context. So these are some media coverage on AI and how we have implemented it in Norwegian media. Now, the goal is to have the highest return with the lowest risk. This is how we think in healthcare anyways. It's a very conservative sector. Mark Zuckerberg's mantra of saying, just move fast and break things really doesn't apply to healthcare. There it's a modified version. Move fast and do no harm. which is difficult. Now, what we're looking for is how can we have more effectiveness, more diagnostic accuracy, and automation. We would like to do less of the things that we don't really like to do. Administrative work, that's for sure. That's something we really need to address. Which brings me to the hype part of this lecture. Now, we have seen examples of things being hyped. This is a picture from back in 2011 when IBM Watson was able to beat the best candidates at Jeopardy. They thought, okay, now it's winning at quiz, it can certainly win at diagnosing cancer. So they tried to build that. However, they were promising a lot of things. And it all fell flat a couple of years later. Now, we're not using IBM Watson in our hospitals. Almost no places in the world are we using that. They promised too much, it was hyped, and the technology really wasn't as good as it is today. If you had made that claim today, it could be backed. Back in 2011, that wasn't the case. What happened because of those claims? Healthcare professionals thought, oh, it doesn't work, it's just another thing that you're saying, oh, it's like, this is something I've heard, it's like blockchain or crypto, it's never going to really be something that works. Of course, it depends, but still, this is what happens when you promise too much and you don't really deliver. There's a difference in confidence. How will you believe the next technology coming? Now, there's also another thing. So AI has been hyped, but what I think is very important to understand is the estimation of how much money it's going to be generating. That's what has been hyped. So you will see a market correction. So a lot of the media coverage has now been about, has the AI bubble burst? Gen AI, too much spend, too little benefit? Of course, in healthcare, that is really, it's difficult to estimate. How can you put a number on lives saved and lives gained in a lifespan? So it is important to distinguish between the hype surrounding what AI technology can actually accomplish and the economic benefits it promises. So speculation about economic gains, it may be inflated. Now, according to this year's Nobel Peace Prize winner in economics, Darren Acemoglu, the outlook is more uncertain than most forecasts suggest. So while it is important and it is impossible actually to predict the effects of AI over the next decade, it will likely be tied to improvements in existing technologies, is his hypothesis. So it's not entirely dependent on the new technology itself, but how we implement and how our infrastructure is built. Now, let's get back on track to talking about hurdles. What is actually blocking AI from coming into healthcare even more at a higher pace? Now, I'm going to get personal. So I have actually been misdiagnosed by AI one time. I was going on this trip abroad. We were going to learn from other hospitals around the world on how to implement AI in a Norwegian context. We were going to learn and come back and implement them. And then they needed, at a point we were visiting all these startups that were building AI tools for healthcare. One of them were building this for eye diseases. So one was screening for 3 eye diseases, and all of them were age-related. And they needed one volunteer from the audience, just like you. And then they said, somebody who wants to volunteer, go first. Then I looked around, thought, okay, I'm the only one under the age of 60. I'm good. I'll take it. Big mistake. So I did the screening. It was green. The light was green for 2 of those 3 diseases. So I was fine. The last one flared red. Then I thought, I really have glaucoma? Okay. Then I asked the developers, what does this mean? Why is it red? Do I have glaucoma? Then they said to me, yes, you have. Next. So they really didn't care about me as an individual or patient. They couldn't care less. And of course, they didn't know that I was a healthcare person or that I was a doctor, but this wasn't my specialty. I didn't know about like the specifics in eye diseases. So of course, I was actually trembling on the inside. I was like, God, having glaucoma before you're 40, that's really something. So I went back home and I looked up an eye specialist. I didn't tell her that I had done this. I didn't want to bias her. So I just told her, can you please check my eyes? I think something's wrong with them. She checked them, and then she said, everything is fine. You're good. You don't have anything. And then I told her, well, actually, AI told me that I have glaucoma. Can you please check again? So she looked at the pictures. And then she told me, you're very healthy. These eyes are perfect. What I can also tell you is that you have like a normal variant in one of your eyes. It's nothing, certainly not disease, but it's something curious. You have an extra layer of fat on your optic nerve. I'm like, okay, whatever, but is that the disease? No, it's not a disease. It's just a normal variant. Okay, and then I ask her, well, okay, could this be misinterpreted as glaucoma? Then she goes, I don't know about AI, but yeah, you could imagine that that could be misinterpreted. And then I ask her, well, what percentage of people have this? What is the prevalence, as we say in medicine? How many people have this? And then she goes, less than 1% of the world's population. So the thing that I had, which made me a minority, not my skin color, okay, I knew that from before, but I was a double minority here. So I had something in my eyes that could be misinterpreted, and less than 1% of the world had it, which means their training data wasn't balanced. They didn't have this in their training data. How could they have it? Now, I could go back and tell them, oh, you really need to fix this, and I would have. The problem was getting my retinal images was really hard. They couldn't send it to me on email. They could only give me a printout, black and white, which isn't good enough. So that was my next thing, which led me into entrepreneurship. I went into startup because I wanted to fix this. Why can't you own your own data in a way? Like, I will tell you now, it's easier to donate your organs than it is to donate your data. Absurd. That's another story, but still, that remains the truth. It's very difficult. So again, you can be misdiagnosed by AI, and you really need to be careful. Like healthcare professionals, they really need to understand how the data sets are managed, how they can become balanced, and what they need to look for. This is the reason why everyone needs to learn at least a little bit of AI, like foundational understanding of it. Now, in healthcare, we have other problems. There is a lack of clinical validation of AI in medicine. Now, if you look at the data from US Food and Drug Administration, FDA, only 56% of approved AI tools are clinically validated. Now, I want you to really be aware of something. The way you use validate, technologists, programmers, developers, is different from the way clinicians use validate. So what we mean validate is, have you tested it in the hands of the doctors on the patients, real patients, not a simulation? That is called clinical validation, which is different from a technical validation. Now, only 56% of these approved AI tools have been clinically validated. You will never see that number for drugs. It will be 99%. So only less than 5% of the approved AI tools had conducted what is called a randomized controlled trial. This is the gold standard in medicine. You have two groups of patients in a group or in a study. One group is getting the intervention, the other group is a control, and then you compare. That's how you know if a drug has been working or not, right? So why wouldn't you do that for AI? It's because it's not necessary. These companies, they're not mandated into doing this, so they just skip it, they omit it. And the problem is, we're actually making up this artificial difference between drugs and AI tools, when the potential for harm could be the same. So that is one thing we need to be better at. And you're seeing this. How many RCTs are there for AI tools? How many studies are there where you have tested AI tools on actual patients? We have only 2 in Norway as of last year. 92% of the studies were conducted at only 1 study site. That is also a problem. How do you know if the results are generalizable? How do you know if something that works for one population will also work for a different one, if you have only tested it at one specific center? And most of these studies are from the US and China. That is also a problem. These are populations very different from the Norwegian, Nordic ones. And only, or 81% of the studies have positive primary endpoints, meaning you're looking for endpoints that measure how many more polyps can you detect with AI. You're not actually asking how much has the mortality rate gone down. That would take years. That would take 10 years, 20 years, which is why they don't do this. You don't mandate people to look for the hard stuff. Let's move on. These are some of the media coverage from this summer. For those of you who do not speak or read Norwegian, it says that doctors are being, one doctor had been looking for cancer in CT scans and overlooked them. And he is now being, there has been this big case where they're looking into all the cases of CT scans that he has been looking into. They're trying to find where it went wrong. So a lot of these cancer patients actually had results and findings that would mean that they needed the follow-up, but that has fallen through. Now, what can happen? If you had used AI, you would have a second opinion in this, so you would probably be off better. The AI tool would probably flag this and then said, oh, you overlooked this. So why wouldn't we wish to have such a tool? There is a problem with acquiring AI into this, and that is something we will address here. Now, can AI lead to more fear-based decision-making? This is the problem with using AI. Now, in a scenario, you could have the doctor being right about the diagnosis and the AI being right. That is good. That is very good. Everybody has done the task, and they're also agreeing. Very good. That's what we want. Then you could have a situation where the doctor is wrong, but the AI is right. That could lead to lawsuit. So even though you want to have this, because it's better to have one right than two wrongs, it's still a problem for the doctors. So you could get sued. Now, not maybe necessarily in Norway, but in the US, this is already starting to happen. And then there's a third case. You could have a doctor being right and the AI is wrong. That is also good, because the person that is in charge of the decision, the clinical decision, it's the doctor. So the healthcare professionals, they are in charge still. Even though the rate of precision for AI is going up, the doctors are still in charge. Now, what happens if the doctors are wrong and the AI is wrong? That's sort of good, because then there's no lawsuit, but it's very bad for the patients. No one being right is a big problem for the patients. Now, the point here is, if you know that there is a chance that you might be wrong, you tend to automate your decisions. You tend to be biased. It's called automation bias. You leave the decision to the AIs, or the AI tools, because you're afraid of being sued. You're afraid of the lawsuits. So you're making decisions fear-based. Now, like I said, at the moment, the doctors are having the final say. It's not a really dichotomic situation where you have humans versus AI, but it could get to that. Some places in Norway, they're really struggling to recruit specialists. So in any case, if you go to a hospital in Norway, you would be seen first by a junior doctor. That junior doctor will probably confer with a more specialized and seasoned doctor, right? And of course, ChatGPT could only paint this picture to men, even though in medical faculties, almost 80–90% are women, but still, okay. Now, in the future, you could see a future where you have a lack of doctors, specialists. Now, could you use ChatGPT to confer for junior doctors? Could you use them? Would you be confident that you received the best care if ChatGPT was behind? How many of you would be comfortable with that? I'm not seeing a lot of hands, so I'm assuming you're not so comfortable. The thing is, ChatGPT is passing the bar exams, or the medical bar exams. So why not? This is something we will have to address in the future. Even though we're uncomfortable with it now, it will be something that is relevant for us in the near future. Now, let's go to a different sector. Let's go to sports. Now, they're using AI for oversight there also. They're using something called the Hawkeye system to know whether the tennis ball has fallen inside or outside the court, in or out. Now, they still have line judges. They haven't lost their jobs. But the Hawkeye system, based on AI, is the second opinion. So whenever the line judges have decided on something, one of the players may disagree, you can get a second opinion from the Hawkeye system. The problem is, it has led to something quite unique. Now, the general error rate, it has gone down. It is not due to AI. It's due to the fact that they're being observed. You could have bought a recording machine or just a video recorder, and you would have gotten the same result. They know that they're being observed. You're seeing this in medical research all the time. Whenever you know that you're being observed, your performance goes up. It doesn't need AI. So the general error rate, it went down, but they started to make a new type of errors. They were so afraid of reputational damage that they refrained from taking the less popular choices. So they didn't want to intervene. Let's say the tennis ball, was actually out of court. The line judges would now say, oh, it's in. That way, they didn't have to intervene. They didn't have to stop the game. The audience wasn't complaining. Media didn't write bad press about them. Everybody was fine. So they were being almost nudged. They were nudged into making the simple choice. If you put that in a medical context, you would have something called defensive medicine. You would have doctors doing overdiagnosis and overtreatment. They would take that extra check, not because they wanted the money, but because they didn't want a lawsuit. They would do a lot of procedures just to make sure that they were safe. So you see the point? You can use AI, make fear-based choices, but also you can nudge people into doing something that they really don't agree with. It's easier for them to make a certain choice than another one. Last example that I want to showcase for you is how you can have automation bias, which means excessive trust in machines. Now, this is a picture from the crash of Air France flight 447 that went from Rio de Janeiro to Paris. In 2009, I think. That event was tragic because it resulted in a crash. And the reason for that was a number of things, but it was both technical but also human factors. So one significant factor that contributed to this crash was the lack of sufficient training, actually, for the flight crew, particularly in handling certain emergency situations. So this flight had 3 pilots, and the main pilot, the captain pilot, he went to sleep right after takeoff. This is normal. This is also the case for more senior staff at a hospital. Very early in the evening, they will go to bed so they can save up their battery for later. So this is normal. The second pilot was very close to pension. So he was almost at the end. So he just wanted some extra cash right before his pension started. The third pilot was a youngster. He was not inexperienced, but he was less experienced than the others. So now, when things started to happen, you went from autopilot, which is the case for 90 to 95% of the flight time, now into manual mode. You had to be able to steer the plane, which the less experienced pilot was not able to handle. Now, this is back in 2009. This had a tremendous impact on that flight and the whole story. So to cut the story short, what we learned is the more automation you use, in this case, in the flight industry, you use it for 90 to 95% of the flight time. That is not the case for healthcare. Like, you still do procedures manually. But if you were to automate a lot more, you would also need to do something about the foundational training. you would still need to do some groundwork. So in the case of something going wrong, you still need to have your foundational capabilities in place. So the more you automate, the more you need to train. We seem to forget that sometimes. Now, to wrap it up, this is how we're going to leverage AI for better health. We're going to use data, good quality data. We're going to bring diversity into the data sets. With my personal story, you will remember that. And we need to bring back AI for better health so that we can make better decisions. And for the future of healthcare, it's going to be more personalized, it's going to be more patient-centered, and of course, more AI-enhanced. Now, I think Bill Gates said it very good. He said, we always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10 years. I think this holds true for AI implementation in healthcare. Thank you.